What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Inside Arkansas Football Show presented by our boys over at SARACEN Casino, the #1 sports betting site in the state of Arkansas. That is not my opinion. That is an objective fact. Nobody pays out more money every month. Nobody makes more money every month. These are, again, facts. SARACEN, we appreciate them for all they do for us, of course. And welcome again to the Inside Arkansas Football Show. Now, there are probably a lot of you who are wondering, what is this? Why is Andrew sitting here by himself? Where's John? Where's Curtis? Why is it just the one guy we don't like? Why is he going solo for this? Well, as you may know, Curtis is busy with some very important stuff going on these days. He and his beautiful wife, Michelle, just welcomed their beautiful baby boy, Wesley, into the world. So he's caught up with some dad duty. He's joined Team Dad. And John's a very busy man, so I didn't want to bother him with this. But wanted to try a little bit something different. Now, we're usually pretty structured with our football content. Of course, we do our pregame show, our postgame show, our accountability session, our report card, and then, of course, John's devotional. And, we have Inside Arkansas Live every day throughout the week. But I wanted to try something a little bit different, a little bit out of boredom. One, because there's a pretty big game against Ole Miss coming up this week. Don't know if you've heard about that. Although this episode is not going to serve as like a preview for that matchup. So if that's what you're specifically looking for, that is not what this is. But what I want to do on today's program, I want to go position by position, which is a thing we typically do on the report card, on our fall camp stock updates, stuff like that. We just kind of look position by position. How does Arkansas feel at quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, offensive line, so on and so forth. And I just feel like, and I don't know, perhaps that's too basic, perhaps that's too generic for you guys, but me personally, and I think that's, we all kind of agree that it's the best way to look at this thing. In order to understand the chess game that is football, you have to understand the chess pieces and what the rook can do, what the little horse thing can do, all these things. You have to know what the pieces on the board are capable of and what are the options there. And so that's kind of what I want to do. And we do that again with our post-game report cards. We've done stuff like this before. So some of this is going to be kind of rehashing what we already know. But I feel like this time of year, it's very hard to contextualize what we are seeing and what we know about our football team through 2 weeks. There's just so much going on. You have some data, you have some games, you have some film to look at, you have some things to review. But of course, there's varying levels of competition. You can compare your stats to one team that may have played 2 top 25 teams, and you can compare them to one team who's played 2 D3 teams. And so there's just a lot, which is why I say it's pretty hard this time of year to really know what you have with your football team, let alone any other football team and kind of what's going on. So I want the goal of today's episode for us to just kind of get a little bit of a vibe check of how we feel about each position. And for me personally, honestly, there's always, so I'm a person that I think back to my days as a reporter when I worked for Trey Biddy at Hogs Sports, which is a great, awesome chapter of my career. I'm very grateful for it. But one of the things I struggled with, and I was very early in my career at this point, didn't have maybe the confidence, didn't have, honestly, the street cred, or just I didn't feel like I had earned my respect enough, but I kind of kept my opinions to myself a lot. When you're working as a reporter, as a journalist, you're not really supposed to do that, say, oh, this is what I think. You're more just saying this is what happened. And so I struggled with that a little bit of like not being able to just make it known what I feel. I don't want you guys, as people that watch the show, people that listen to what we have going on, I don't want you to be wondering, how does Andrew feel about this? Did Andrew think we were going to, I want you to kind of know where I stand on everything. And then we can argue, we can debate, we can share perspectives and all that. But I think for me personally, there's always, and we do this thing in sports where we feel how we feel and we want everyone to feel that way. And I'm not trying to come at you from that standpoint, but a lot of times when I'm trying to talk ball, whether it's Twitter, on the show every day, or whatever, I see people misconstrue my viewpoint. They'll be arguing with me, not realizing we agree. Like, I view it the same way you do. I mean, for example, last week, I was being accused of being too much of a sunshine pumper, of like saying the defense is going to be awesome just because I did not join John Daly Sr. I did not join John Daly in declaring Arkansas's defense the worst in program history. And so people were like, hey, you think this defense is going to be great? What the heck, man? And, oh, you think the offense was just cooking in those scrimmages for no reason? And I'm like, listen, I'm the one who came on this very program after those scrimmages and was like, red flag for the defense. Like, I feel like I've been pretty critical of D-line, corner, some other things like pass rush. I've been very critical. And by the way, we're going to touch on all that later, but I just feel like there's a lot of times people are arguing with each other of, oh, you need to agree with me, and I feel this way, you feel that way, and it gets very tense. We like to come at our own in the Razorback fan base, and I know I'm not going to be able to solve all of those issues, but I do want us to kind of get on the same page about what we've seen through 2 weeks, maybe set some expectations moving forward. Of course, Arkansas's got a very big game again against Ole Miss, where we're going to find out a lot about this football team. But I want us to kind of all be on the same page. And then from here, we'll go into the Ole Miss game. We can differ on how we view the matchup or maybe how it's going to play out the rest of the year. But I do want us to be on the same page about what has happened to this point, where we were at preseason, maybe with some of these positions, and sort of assess our work so far through 2 weeks. So bear with me. We're going to go position by position. I'm going to try and make this as concise and short as I can. But as you guys, if you know me, I'm really bad about that. So we'll see how that goes. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about our boys over at OZK Insurance. Are you tired of juggling insurance companies just to find the right coverage? At OZK Insurance and Rogers, they make insurance simple again. As a 100% independent agency, they shop the entire marketplace to deliver the best combination of cost and coverage, saving you both time and money, whether it's home, auto, boat, motorcycle, life, or commercial insurance. Their friendly team has access to a wide range of flexible options designed just for you. They serve Northwest and Central Arkansas, including Bentonville, Centerton, Fayetteville, Little Rock, Hot Springs, Springdale, and beyond. Let OZK Insurance be the trusted advisor you never knew you needed. You don't believe me? Just ask the 600 people who gave them a 5-star Google review. Start today with a free online quote at ozkinsurance.com or call 479-715-4200. OZK Insurance, protection made simple. And we appreciate them for all they do with us here at Inside Arkansas, all of our sponsors. Okay, so let's get into this thing, and let's start, as we always do, with the quarterback position, Mr. Taylen Green. Ever heard of him? You look at Taylen Green, man, and it's very fascinating. And so I'm going to try. This is going to be a little bit of a long-winded quarterback rant here, but I really don't want to throw cold water on anything or really even say definitively Taylen Green is good or he's going to struggle in this matchup or whatever. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Again, I'm coming from a place of love, just trying to understand this thing. You look at Taylen and the statistics of what he's done through 2 weeks. Very easy to be very encouraged. He's 41 of 57. That is good for a 71.9% completion rate, 561 passing yards, 9.8 yards per attempt. He's thrown 10 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions, both of which came, very, very shortly after one another against Arkansas State the other day. You look at the PFF grades. He is the number 8 quarterback nationally, number 4 in the SEC. He's put up great numbers. He's graded out very well. Again, and you look at Taylen Green as an athlete, as a long, rangy, athletic guy who's got some escapability, being a senior, year 2 of the Bobby offense. There's a lot of reason for optimism. And again, through 2 games, he's shown a lot of very good things that are easy to get excited about. The dude ran for 151 yards on the ground and 9 carries the other day. We've kind of seen, and this is stuff we've seen before, Taylen can absolutely take over a game, and Taylen can absolutely dominate a game. It just does so happen to be that most of these games where he puts up these crazy numbers are not against super proven SEC defenses with a ton of talent on them. But by the way, that's something that applies to a lot of quarterbacks. Like, that's not a Taylen specific issue of, yeah, he's really good against bad teams, and then it's a little harder for him to have production against good teams. But I do just want to talk about that and note that this is not something that we have not seen from Taylen Green before. Now, against Alabama A&M, as good as that game was, and statistically, it was about as good as you could play. It might have been, I think it was like tied for Tyler Wilson for the second most passing touchdowns in the game, something crazy like that. One of the best single games we've seen a Razorback quarterback play. So I'm not saying, hey, yeah, he's been doing this for a while, but we have seen Taylen really light up some bad defenses. Just last year in the season opener against UAPB, he goes 16 for 23, 229 yards, 10 yards an attempt, had 2 rushing touchdowns, had 2 passing touchdowns, ran for 88 yards. In week 2 against a 3-9 Oklahoma State team, which we did not realize was as bad as they were at the time, he had 416 yards through the air, 9.2 yards an attempt, only 1 passing touchdown in that game to 1 interception. Did have 61 yards on the ground as well. Of course, he also had the bowl game where he had 341 yards, 16 yards an attempt in that game, couple touchdowns, 1 on the ground, 81 rushing. My point being, we have seen Taylen Green show us a very high ceiling of what he can accomplish in one football game, particularly if you have a defense with some holes. I think that's one thing we can all agree on with Taylen Green. If you have a weakness on your defense, he is very capable of exploiting it. He is very capable of doing that with his legs. He's capable of doing it with his arm. He's one of those guys. Is he consistent throw to throw? Is he consistent drive to drive or even game to game? Maybe not, but there is not a throw on the field Taylen Green cannot make. And so, again, it's why when you see him play the way he does in some of these matchups, it's very easy to let your imagination run wild with, holy cow, there's all these things we can do. We can get the RPO game going, the read option. I mean, he can make throws deep. He's made plays down the field in his career. We've seen him be good in the screen game. He makes good decisions at the line of scrimmage most of the time. Like, he's very good at a lot of these things. It's very easy to just be like, man, this guy's just going to do this forever. This week now against Ole Miss presents Taylen with a very good opportunity to dispel another narrative about his career, which is that he's boom or bust. And that, as high as that ceiling is, there's also a pretty low floor if you don't know what I'm talking about. He had a couple games last year, for example, the UAB game, which was not even against a good defense. He goes 11 for 26 in that game, 161 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Was 12 for 27 against Auburn, 151 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. He had 0 passing touchdowns in 4 of his 8 SEC games last year, and I know he was banged up for some of those, but there were also some of those games where he had a passing touchdown, like A&M and Auburn, where it didn't really go well for him. So against very good competition, Taylen is a largely unproven quarterback, and so I've seen a lot of people this week, and given the numbers that Taylen has put up, of course, statistically, it's hard to find a better quarterback than Taylen Green through 2 weeks in college football. That is a fact, 100%. But do you guys also have to acknowledge that context? Because I've seen a lot of people that are like, and they're being dead serious. I'm not even making fun of these people. I'm saying there's been people that have been like, why is Taylen not on this Heisman list? Why is he not listed as the best quarterback in the SEC? Like, why is he not getting that national love? And it's a very simple answer. You have to go show us something that you have not shown us before. And to the point I was making earlier, what Taylen has done in these first 2 weeks, again, the Alabama A&M game, I'm not saying he's ever had a game that good, but he is not doing something conceptually that we have never seen before. I would also argue it's not like there's this new layer to his game where he's making these specific throws that he's never made before, or they've unlocked this new dynamic with him in the run game. A lot of what we've seen Taylen do, and he's done it very well, and he's done it more consistently, which is very important for him. It's not like he has showed us anything that we have not seen before. And so that is not my way of saying Taylen has not been very good in these first 2 weeks, and that you should not be very encouraged by that and excited for, hey, what can this look like? And I do think there's something to be said for, how good he's been in these games. Obviously, you're not going to replicate that against SEC competition, but if it's this good against so-and-so Alabama A&M and Arkansas State, it should at least be, XYZ against SEC teams. We can have that conversation. And again, Taylen's going to have that opportunity to go out there and, play on the road at Ole Miss against a legitimate defense, prove that he can make those plays consistently and be that efficient savant in the passing game, which Arkansas has kind of leaned on him to be. He's going to have his opportunities to go show that. And so you ask, hey, what's it going to take for Taylen to get on one of these Heisman lists? You go out there and put up these kind of numbers against Ole Miss, we're having a very different conversation. And so I think that's, the thing that surprised me when people try and talk about Taylen's performance. And he's a very polarizing quarterback, as is any quarterback that starts for a long period of time. I mean, hell, this time last year, half of you wanted Arkansas to bench him for Malachi Singleton, and you were dead serious when you felt that way. It's always polarizing with quarterbacks. So I understand why there's going to be people who view him as a top 3 quarterback in the country, and then some that are like, I don't even think he's that good. I understand how that happens. I just think it's very interesting that the narratives that you kind of see, because there's so much of it that we just don't know. We have to see what it looks like with this offense, with these new wide receivers, with this new offensive line, which we'll get to in a second. What does this look like? The one thing I will say in kind of defense of Taylen and kind of an optimistic point of view to look at is, given how many new pieces there are with this offense, I think that was a question some people had in the offseason, is like, hey, Taylen, put up X amount of numbers last year with these guys. Now you have a completely new skill group. What's that going to look like? That really hasn't been something at all. We haven't been seeing miscommunications. And so I buy all of the narratives of Taylen is year 2 of the offense. He's now a senior. This is his 4th year as a starter at the collegiate level. He should be kind of putting things together. It's time for it to all kind of work for him. And so far, he seems on track for something like that. But there is a very big test for him. And I'm excited to see how he handles it, man. Like that's kind of what you want to do. Like that's what you do as an athlete. Like you want to have these big moments where you get to show people, you get to change that narrative about you and the program and kind of where you guys are headed and what you're capable of. So I look forward to seeing him under the lights in Oxford with a chance to kind of make a statement nationally. And so we'll see how he's able to handle that. But I am generally, mark me down as a pro Taylen Green guy. I just wanted to kind of present the question of, is it going to look different against SEC teams? And I have no doubt that it will look different. I'm not saying he's not going to go 4 of 8 SEC games without a passing touchdown. I feel confident in saying that. But is it going to be as consistent? Is it going to be as legitimate? Is that floor maybe going to raise a little bit? Because, again, we know the ceiling, but we've also seen it's a pretty low floor. Is that floor going to raise a little bit? And will we get more consistency? Time will tell. But I'm excited to watch Taylen this weekend. Moving on, I'm not going to spend as much time on the running backs and wide receivers simply because there's not a ton to really argue about this. Like, is there any question about who Arkansas's number 1 wide receiver is? No. Is there any question about who Arkansas's number 1 running back is? No. But looking at some numbers real quick, Mike Washington, so he's got 18 carries, 195 yards, 10.8 yards per carry, just 1 touchdown. Braylon Russell, the 16 carries, 66 yards, 4.1 yards per carry, and a touchdown there. I think the thing that surprised me when it comes to Mike Washington, the player, and sort of the skill sets that he showed on the field, I wouldn't say I've been surprised at all. I feel like he has kind of looked as advertised. He's a big, powerful back with some explosion. He's shown some big playability. He's shown that he's a dangerous back when he finds that seam. He kind of reminds me, he's a little, this is going to sound crazy, he's a little Corliss Marshall-y. Y'all remember Corliss Marshall from like 2014, 2015? When he finds a seam, he just kind of seems like he's shot out of a cannon. Maybe that's a weird comparison. I don't know. But I like what I've seen from Mike Washington in the skill sets of like, I mean, again, he's just a big, strong, fast back. He's not the most side-to-side make you miss juke move guy, but he is a big, strong back that likely, we'll see how he holds up in SEC play, should be able to handle a lot of that workload and then also offer that home run ability, that ability to kind of take, not take the top off of a defense, but really make a defense pay and force them to be really conscious at the line of scrimmage. So I like what I've seen from Mike Washington. Braylon Russell, I wouldn't say I feel that exact way about. I think he has a different skill set. Large guy, although weight-wise, they're pretty similar. Braylon Russell's a little bit more physical style of play. He's almost not trying to make you miss. He wants to run through you. So I have no doubt he's going to be effective at the goal line. I just think when we go back to the spring and we thought this was going to be like this 1-2 punch that Braylon was going to be the leader of, I wouldn't even really describe it as a 1-2 punch, although they have similar carries through 2 weeks, 18 for Mike Washington, 16 for Braylon Russell. I'll be very interested to see what that looks like in SEC play. Is it going to be a 50-50 split? I have my doubts. I think it's going to be more 65-35, but we'll see. But I think the thing that surprised me the most, I mean, I read those numbers. I mean, that's 9 carries per game for Mike Washington and 8 carries per game for Braylon Russell. Now, Arkansas's been in some very lopsided margin of victory here. So it makes sense why you're not just going to force feed your running backs for no reason. I actually liked what Sam had to say because I think it was Tom Murphy that asked him, he's like, hey, would you maybe like to see a little bit more carries for your running backs? And he's like, they're healthy. Like they're fine. That we haven't had to give them the ball a ton. So like, actually, no, I'm okay having not. Like, would I like to have more of a sample size to evaluate? Cool. But I'm not dying to force feed my running backs and run them into the ground. And I think they all kind of know we would rather have those hits later. It's like when Dave Van Horn, of course, I've got to make a baseball reference. When Dave Van Horn pulls his starting pitcher after 4 innings in February and he says, hey, I'm going to need that inning down the line. I'm going to give you that inning back in the postseason when we really need it. I think it's the same there with the running back. So, but I think just conceptually, again, big games where you're up 50, I get why you're not force feeding those guys. I do just think like stylistically, Arkansas has been a lot more pass heavy than I maybe anticipated. I think when I thought about this team in the offseason, I thought they might lean a little bit more on that run game, especially with Taylen. Now, of course, I am cool, again, with them not using Taylen a ton in the run game against Alabama A&M and against Arkansas State, although, of course, he did pop off for some big runs there. I will be interested to see if that distribution, because it's been about a little over 60% pass for Arkansas. And again, this is in games where you're winning by 1,000 points. So it's like, if you're 60% in blowouts, you're probably going to be like 65, maybe even 70% some games in terms of pass versus run. And that's just something I probably wouldn't have expected preseason. If you had asked me, I would have probably predicted more of a 50-50 split there. Seems like Arkansas is more pass to set up the run than they are run to set up the pass. And Arkansas really doesn't run a ton of play action also, which is just something that they didn't do a ton of last year. I noticed that a lot of Taylen's pass attempts are true dropbacks. They are not, screen. They do run some screens here, but not a high number of screens, not a high number of play actions, not a high number of rollouts or getting them on the move, which is interesting because you would think his skill set would kind of lend itself to that. A lot of Taylen's pass attempts are in the pocket, straight 3, 5, 7-step drop, whatever. Not a ton of run game setting up the pass attack. It's more the opposite, which again is just maybe not what I expected. But overall, I'm fine with the run game. I'm just interested to see when we get into SEC play and the line of scrimmage is a little bit harder to win. Does Arkansas have the backs that they can really turn around and hand it to 15, 20 times and control a game through the run? I'm not 100% sure, but I also don't think that's something they're going into this matchup with Ole Miss planning to do. If you're not really asserting that run game against Alabama A&M and Arkansas State, and that's not to say they couldn't run the ball. I just mean they didn't go out of their way to make sure they established the run. Are they really going to do it against Ole Miss? We'll see, but it has been very interesting so far. In terms of the pass catchers, again, there's no real controversy. Omega Blake is certainly that number one guy. You look at the numbers, Omega Blake, 12 receptions, 185 yards, a couple touchdowns. CJ Brown right behind him in receptions, 7 for 85, 2 touchdowns. Both came in the opener. Jaylen Brown right there behind him. Jaylen Brown, CJ Brown, and Raylan Sharp all right there in the same range. Brown has 7 for 85. CJ Brown, that is. Jaylen Brown has 6 for 74. Raylan Sharp has 5 for 84. So again, right there in that same range. And then Omega Blake doubling those guys up kind of alone by himself there at the top in terms of targets, receptions, yards. One thing I will point out, Omega Blake averaging about 15 yards per reception. Raylan Sharp is actually the guy who has the highest yards per reception, making the most of his plays down the field, which is kind of interesting. The 2 touchdowns he's caught were like 35 and 30 or something like that, which is interesting because Raylan Sharp was a guy that averaged 10 yards per reception last year at Fresno State, and Omega Blake led the entire country at 24 yards per reception. So kind of interesting that Raylan Sharp has kind of become the big play threat through 2 weeks, and Omega Blake has been the consistent 3rd and 7, go to him, getting you 12, 15 yards per catch there. I'll be very interested to see if some of these guys, like Omega, CJ Brown is, of course, a guy that they really like his speed. Jaylen Brown is in there for his speed. Will Arkansas start to maybe try and take the top off of these defenses a little bit? Because I think a big part of Raylan Sharp's success down the field is the fact that nobody expects Raylan Sharp to be a deep threat. That is not something he's done a ton of in his career, even going back to Missouri State. He was a possession receiver, catching the ball at the line of scrimmage, catching those slants, catching those drags, catching those screens. He's going to catch a ton of crossing routes here at Arkansas. It's interesting that he's made a couple plays down the field, and Omega Blake really hasn't had that big deep shot yet, but been pleased with the receivers. I've been surprised, and again, I'm not being skeptical here, but I have been surprised at how many people no longer have any questions about the wide receiver room. I feel like in the spring, that was kind of the big debate, was like, hey, running back and wide receiver, and Mike Washington quickly answered the running back question, but it's like, who's Taylen going to throw the ball to? Like, they don't have any returning production. Omega Blake is the guy that on paper, he had 700 some yards at Charlotte last year, has some production, had played in the SEC before. That makes sense. Like, that he would be a guy that you can count on. Raylan Sharp had about 500 yards at Fresno last year. You knew he was going to be able to give you something. Outside of that, it was like Cam Shanks caught some balls at UAB. CJ Brown caught 5 passes last year. Like, there wasn't a ton of stability in that receiver room. So it was a very big question mark. And that's not to say we're doubting the ability of the room. It's just, you got to go out there and prove it. And it's a lot easier to sell yourself on the idea of, hey, this guy that had 800 yards last year, he's going to help, and he's going to, replicate that production and maybe even up it, compared to a guy who has not played at the SEC level or he's even been in the SEC level and not played at all, like Courtney Crutchfield or, an Andy Jean or someone like that. And so it just was, I was surprised by how many people through 2 weeks have just now completely been like, all right, we're set. Receivers are loaded. Omega Blake is Megatron, and we're all good. I do think, again, I think Omega Blake is kind of in his own category in this discussion because he's a guy that has caught passes in an SEC game before, albeit a few years ago at South Carolina, has been known to be a huge playmaker at the Division I level. I think he's kind of exempt from this discussion, but I think this is a big week here against Ole Miss for guys like C.J. Brown, guys like Jaylen Brown, who I've been impressed by. Jaylen Brown finding his way into the end zone twice doesn't really strike me as a red zone target, but he's been finding the end zone pretty easily there. What will they look like against an SEC secondary? Like, are they going to be getting open consistently in these games against Arkansas State and Alabama A&M? Taylen's kind of had his pick of the litter of three guys kind of streaming wide open on a lot of these plays. I mean, they've gotten the tight ends involved a good bit. So it's like there has been no issues through 2 weeks. I'm not telling you, hey, you should be concerned about the wide receivers or they're putting together all these red flags or anything. I just am surprised at how many people are kind of just going into this Ole Miss game like have no doubts about Arkansas is going to just throw the ball around. C.J. Brown's going to catch 50, 3 balls, 50 yards or something like that, and Omega Blake's going to continue to dominate. I'm not saying you shouldn't feel that way. I just do think that's interesting how many people have gone from it's a huge question mark to no need to even discuss it. And they're another group that it really just comes down to what they do here this weekend. And I think C.J. Brown, a guy that only caught, 5 for 62 last year, and now he's already surpassed that through 2 games as a sophomore. Excited about his development. I like his body type too. I mean, 6'1", 200. I like that. If I'm being honest, I'm shaming a little bit. I'm body shaming. Raylan Sharp and Cam Shanks, I kind of look and I'm like, are they going to be able to catch passes over the middle in the SEC? Smaller guys, even Jaylen Brown, who I don't know what he's listed at, just kind of looks smaller out there. I do like that CJ has a little bit of that versatility and that make you miss and can beat you downfield. And he's also a big body. I feel like he's on a very positive trajectory. He's probably the guy I'm most excited about in that room. But I'm excited to look at what this wide receiver room can do against an SEC opponent because we'll have a much better sense of how to evaluate these guys after that. Quickly talking about the tight end room. Not like a crazy amount of production, but Rohan Jones, good to see him catch 2 passes for 74 yards and a touchdown the other day. Showed some of that breakaway speed that we've been hearing about. Nice to see. I'll be interested to see if there's like some schematic things they can do with him. Maybe, like how they used to use Chris Gregg, how they used to use DJ Williams. You got a guy with that athleticism, could be useful in the pass game. But it does seem like Jaden Platt, the transfer from Texas A&M, is the guy that they seem to like the most in that room, and he's the guy that has played the most snaps by a pretty good margin. Andreas Poschke, of course, caught a touchdown week 1, caught a pass from KJ Jackson last week. He's gotten some run as well. We'll be fine. We'll be intriguing to see like what Rohan Jones's snap count, if it starts to increase, because he really didn't play a ton week 1, and he didn't play a ton in the first half week 2, and then kind of popped off there in garbage time. What does that distribution of snaps look like? How much is Arkansas going to go to tight end? Of course, Maddox Lassiter's also a factor in this because he lines up in the fullback position sometimes. There's a lot of possibilities. Overall, I'm very pleased with Arkansas's tight end room because I had a pretty low expectation. And that's not because I thought these guys sucked. It's just it wasn't a huge point of emphasis, but it's just nice. I mean, Jaden Platt's a guy that had only played a handful of snaps at the collegiate level in 2 years at A&M. He's gotten a lot of valuable experience these last couple of weeks. He has the body type. He has the athleticism. Seems like it's maybe starting to come together for him. And Rohan Jones was very productive at Montana State at a very good FCS school. And so I don't know if there's like a huge transition for him so far. Maybe we'll see that in the SEC a little bit, but I'm excited to see if he can make some plays against some of these SEC defenses. Now I want to talk about offensive line because this is a little bit interesting. So I'm going to get in. This is the part of the show now. If you watch our report cards, we reference PFF grades, Pro Football Focus grades, a lot. And it's not because we think PFF is just these geniuses that have cracked the code on scouting and data and all this. It's just kind of a data point. It's no different than if I listed out, a wide receiver's yards per reception or someone's batting average or whatever. It's like batting average you don't rank people based on batting average, but it's a reference point and something that you use in your evaluation a little bit. And of course, it's really hard. I mean, there's not stats out there of like, hey, this O lineman, I know on the video game, it'll be like pancakes for this guy. And of course you could do like sacks allowed, and PFF does track stuff like that. They track pressures allowed. And so I lean on them pretty heavily when it comes to line play. And I think they're definitely, they can offer some good context, especially for some defensive guys that, again, stats, it's hard to judge defensive players based on stats. So I do kind of look at those PFF grades, and they're not the end all be all. Sometimes they don't quite match up with what you see with your eyes, and that's perfectly fine. But I just like to use them as a reference point when we're having some of these discussions. And honestly, if I'm being honest with you, the PFF grades for Arkansas's offensive line, not as good as you would probably think, considering how much Arkansas's had success offensively. And it's not that they're grading out poorly, and we'll go through them here in a second here. But the thing that has been noticeable is there's a huge difference in how they have graded out Arkansas's offensive linemen as pass protectors versus how they grade them out in the run game. There is a very huge difference there, which, by the way, coming into the season was something that we heard. Corey Robinson was coming from Georgia Tech, one of the top O-linemen in the portal, had one of the top pass protecting grades in the country last year, playing left tackle in the ACC, but was below average as a run blocker. So that was something we kind of knew. Fernando Carmona, moving inside from tackle to guard, you would assume he'd be pretty good at protecting the passer since he played left tackle last year. Maybe not quite as physical in the run game since he's moving to a more interior position, blocking some nose tackles, blocking some defensive tackles, maybe blocking some three techniques, whatever. Kind of makes sense. Caden Kittler, same thing. Yeah, the center for Arkansas that transferred from UCF, had a very high pass block grade last year. Not a very high, but was much better in the pass blocking department than he was run blocking. Same for Marion Harris, someone who very athletic guy, can move, a lot of versatility, very technical with his hands, good in pass protection. Maybe doesn't have that super physical run blocking style. So it kind of makes sense, but I was just kind of surprised to see some of these numbers in action here. So looking at the offensive tackles real quick, Marion Harris and Corey Robinson are both not too far away from each other. They're right around the lower middle pack in the SEC when you rank them among all of the qualified tackles, and there's about 30 to 35 of them. Of course, 2 tackles per team, 16 teams. They're kind of right in that 20 to 25 range among SEC tackles. Both of them, though, above average in terms of SEC tackles and pass protections, and both near the bottom of the entire league in terms of run blocking grade. And again, small sample size, 2 games, and PFF it's not a foolproof thing at all. That's just their opinion. That's kind of how they've assessed Arkansas's offensive line play. And you look at guard, would it surprise you if I told you not only is Kobe Branham rated higher on PFF and performing better by their grades than Fernando Carmona, Kobe Branham has been the best Arkansas offensive lineman according to Pro Football Focus. Now, again, not a perfect science by any means, but Kobe Branham is listed as the number 18 guard nationally, and that is among 558 qualified FBS guards. Kobe Branham is ranked number 18. He is number 2 in the SEC. Fernando Carmona is 85th nationally, again, out of 558 guards. So that's pretty solid. Doesn't look as good for him when it's 13th among 32 qualified guards in the SEC. So above the middle of the pack, above average, but nationally 85 out of 558. So pretty solid grades. Same for both of those guys. Now, Branham has actually graded out fairly well in the run game, but he's still better as a pass protector than he is a run blocker, according to PFF. And Carmona, of course, his isn't as drastic as a gap as Corey Robinson and Marion Harris, but he is solidly better as a pass protector. And then Kittler is, I would say, according to PFF, Kittler is the weak link of Arkansas's offensive line. He is 127th nationally out of 264 centers, so right at the middle of the pack, maybe just a slight step above the middle of the pack, and he is 13th out of 17 SEC centers. You may say, Andrew, how are there 17 qualified centers in terms of snap count with 16 SEC teams? For some reason, A&M has 2 centers that have logged enough snaps to be there, and both of them are rated above Caden Kittler for whatever reason, and he is 13th out of 17 in the SEC. Grades are like right around average, right around 60, 61, right around, he's like roughly a net positive by like 1%. So that's how PFF grades Arkansas's offensive line. And I got to be honest, it's not terribly dissimilar from how I view them. I haven't sat through and like really graded myself every snap of the run blocking and really seen what they have, but my eyes have told me they don't really move the line of scrimmage a whole lot in the run game. I think they've done more than enough. But if you look at basically, in some of you may be asking, well, Arkansas ran the ball for 322 yards the other day. how did the offensive line not grade out super well? If you remember some of those rush attempts, one, you had a Mike Washington 55-yard touchdown run right off the bat where he breaks through the first line, and it was kind of out on the edge, not really up the middle, and he just kind of found a seam and broke one. Taylen Green also had a couple of scrambles for big gains, which not only do not credit the offensive line, you could argue they happened in spite of the offensive line, although some of them were pretty easy, just find a lane, go. And so that's how you have an Arkansas team that runs the ball for a lot of success in weeks 1 and week 2 without having their O-line grade out super well. One thing, and I touched on this, I think it was on our post-game show the other day, one thing that I do think is interesting, and if you've watched Arkansas, the way they run the ball, they can use their tackles and guards. I mean, tackles and guards. Hell, I haven't seen Kittler move around a ton, but Marion Harris, very athletic guy out there on the edge. You can pull him as a right tackle, which is a luxury that not a lot of teams do, but it kind of creates some intriguing possibilities for how you can run the ball, how you can run some counters, run some sweeps, run some outside zone looks, and kind of get some numbers out on the edge. And I think that's going to be something we see a lot with Arkansas when they run the ball and when they're at their best. And if you really think about some of the most explosive plays they've had in the run game, it's been out on the edge on a stretch play or on a sweep or on a toss. It's not a ton of halfback dive or ISO up the middle. It's not a ton of between the tackles making stuff happen. It's getting out on the edge. And I think that's something that an athletic offensive line that excels in pass protection, someone like Corey Robinson who has great footwork, you can do that with him. Fernando Carmona at guard, who's pretty much a tackle, has great footwork, ton of experience. You can do that with him a little bit. And so it'll be interesting to see schematically what Arkansas does in some of these games to establish the run. And if their offensive line's up for that kind of challenge, and if they do have that in them of just, hey, let's line up, put this game away. We need one first down. Let's just lean on our offensive line. Let's just see if we can move them off the ball and run the ball between the tackles. We haven't really seen Arkansas try and do that a ton. We'll see if they have that capability. Now it's time for our defense. And believe it or not, I'm actually going to be a little bit nicer to the defense than I was to the offense, because I think going into the year, offense I had pretty high expectations for. Defense I had pretty low expectations for. So if I sounded a little bit grumpy or a little bit pessimistic talking about some of those offensive positions, just hang on, because I'm going to get to the defense, which I've been actually pleasantly surprised with in some areas. Still a lot to discuss. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about our boys over at Walter Christmas Lighting of Arkansas. We are getting closer to the holiday season, with Halloween being just around the corner this fall. Many of you love getting into the holiday spirit, but don't really have the time or resources to light up your house and wow the neighborhood. Well, luckily for you, Walter Christmas Lighting has you covered this fall and winter. If you are in Northwest Arkansas or the River Valley, have Walter Christmas Lighting install and set up your house with professional Halloween and Christmas lighting like you've never seen before. All the materials provided, any color, any pattern. They install the lights, free maintenance throughout the holiday season with takedowns happening in January. If you sign up for your Halloween lights, you will also get your Christmas lights for 50% off. Text our guy Brett for a free estimate at 479-459-1380. You can also check out their website, walterchristmaslighting.com, or like them on Facebook by scanning the QR code on your screen. It's Walter Christmas Lighting of Arkansas, your local holiday lighting experts. Man, I'm excited to see some Christmas lights this holiday season, so don't disappoint. Hit up Walter Christmas Lighting. Seriously, I am looking forward to the holidays. Love some good Christmas stuff. I'm going to skim through the defense here. I'm going to let you guys get out of here in a little bit. Shouldn't take me as long on the defense, but I want to start with a defensive line, specifically the defensive ends. And as you guys know, this is a very controversial spot all offseason when you're looking at maybe reasons to be optimistic, things that can concern you, maybe some red flags. In the category of red flags and things that you would worry about, I feel like this Arkansas defensive line, specifically the depth of the group, was way high up there on the list, and there wasn't a ton of proven production. I mean, someone like Quincy Rhodes, who we're going to talk about, has been awesome, and he is a guy that we were all very optimistic about. We all felt good about Quincy Rhodes. We felt good, okay, that's going to be a guy that you can move into a starting role. Even he only had one sack. Cam Ball, preseason All-SEC defensive tackle, captain, team leader. We love his personality. We love his loyalty. He's a hog for life. Even he had 3 sacks in 4 seasons at Arkansas. And so you looked at this room that not only didn't have a ton of depth, but also even some of the guys who we felt good about and the guys that we liked didn't have this like super long history of wreaking havoc in the backfield. And so it really beg the question of, like, is Arkansas going to be able to win at the line of scrimmage on defense? What is that defensive line going to look like? The depth was an issue last year when you had some seniors in Eric Gregory. You had Landon Jackson, who was a third-round pick, and, an all-SEC guy himself. Like, you had some older guys. You had that kid from Louisiana Tech whose name is escaping me, Kiwi Rose. You had him as well, some veteran presence there, and the depth was still very much an issue. And so you lose three legitimate contributors from that group, and you can throw Anton Junkaj as a fourth one in there. Not that he was great, but he was a guy that played a lot of snaps on the defensive line. There's just a lot of unproven commodities in this two deep, in this entire room. I mean, hey, Keyshawn Blackstock has been playing the defensive tackle position for like 12 days, and he's listed in the two deep and has played snaps with the first team defense in both games so far this year. And of course, David Oki, the transfer from Abilene Christian, is an important piece of the context to note. He has been out with injury. They are hoping, fingers crossed, that he can practice yesterday, which would have been Monday, and that if he can practice 2 or 3 days this week, they'll give him a chance to play. But Sam Pittman was openly not super optimistic about the idea of playing a guy in an SEC game when he hasn't really had much practice time. He felt they made that mistake with Xavier Sori, who we'll touch on in a second in the linebacker section. But again, going into the season, D-line was the biggest question mark on the team, without a doubt. And lately, I feel like we've kind of all realized it's more so the defensive tackles. Even though as good as Cam Ball is, there's a lot of question marks. I mean, Danny Saili is a guy that's played a lot of snaps, not a ton of production in his career at either stop. Ian Gerfard, who's a starter for Arkansas, playing a ton of snaps, just made his first career tackle for loss on Saturday, like didn't have hardly any production coming into the year. And so that was a question mark, especially when you add in the David Oki injury. And then Cam Ball is a guy that you're just basically asking to play a ton of snaps, which we'll touch on in a second. So it was very much a red flag area of concern. And I'm not saying that it's not that anymore, but I got to say, I'm encouraged by what I've seen by the two starting defensive ends. And those two starting defensive ends being Phillip Lee and Quincy Rhodes. Phillip Lee, who, by the way, left Saturday's game with a little bit of a limp, a little bit of an injury. He's fine. No biggie. Not even on the injury report this week. He's going to be fine. Phillip Lee, by the way, the transfer from Troy, who had 5 sacks last year, leads the SEC as of today, as of September 8th or September 9th, leads the SEC with 9 quarterback pressures. Had a sack and a half the other day. I can't remember if he had a sack in the opener or not, but he's been getting after the passer, been doing a good job. 9 QB pressures in 2 games, just under 5 per game. Like that, that'll do. Pressures don't always lead to sacks, but if you're constantly putting pressure on the quarterback, whether you're getting home or not, like that is something we can use. Pass rushes also, it's like, isn't it awesome trying to evaluate pass rushers? Because it's the easiest thing in the world. You just see a very big, tall, strong, athletic guy, and he gets to the quarterback. It's like, all right, that guy's good. Like, I could be a scout. I could have looked at Khalil Mack and said, good at football. Jadeveon Clowney, I did look at him. Good at football. Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, good at football. It's like, it's really not that hard of a thing, right? And that's really as simple as it is. Can you get to the quarterback as a defensive end? And I know there's other things. You got to hold up and run game. You got to be gap sound, all this yada, yada. But seriously, like that's what we had question marks about is Arkansas does not have a ton of guys who have a history of getting to the quarterback. Phillip Lee actually might be the exception to that because he had 5 sacks last year. He actually had some production, albeit at a lower level. But even a guy like Justice Boone, who was projected to start for Arkansas, he had played in the FCC and in the SEC, played at Florida. I think he had 2.5, 3 sacks in his entire career. Like, not a ton of a pass rush threat there. And then you go on down the line with like Quincy Rhodes, who had 1 coming into the year. Charlie Collins did not have a sack coming into the year. Like, there just wasn't a ton of proven production. So Phillip Lee with the 9 pressures early on, very good sign. And Quincy Rhodes, who is tied for 7th in the SEC with 6 quarterback pressures, leads Arkansas with 3 sacks. He also leads Arkansas in PFF grade overall. He's got a 76.0 pass rush grade, which is very solid, well above average, and like a 78.3 overall grade. He is Arkansas's highest graded defender per PFF among the guys that have had enough snaps to qualify. So I'm very encouraged by at least that starting group. And when I talk to people who had connections inside the program coming out of fall camp, that was basically the narrative I heard of the defensive line is like, hey, that first unit, solid. We love that first unit. Everything after that, don't ask. Like, it just don't worry about it. But we love that first group. which is kind of where we were at last year with Landon Jackson, Eric Gregory, some of those guys. And so I'm okay. I know that's not encouraging. Like, obviously you want that depth. You really do need about 8 to 10 guys to get through SEC play. And I'm still very, very skeptical that Arkansas has anywhere near those 8 to 10 guys. But we at least have a starting point now where we have a starting group of ends that are pretty competent. Cam Ball, of course, with a ton of experience there at one of the defensive tackle spots. And Ian Jaffard, who I've been very hard on publicly, simply because I feel like every time people would talk about him, you would talk about his size or, hey, he was a recruit. He was this as a recruit. He had offers from so-and-so. And, he's 387 pounds. How could he not be good? It was never about the production. And so I was like, can we just maybe see him make a play, hit someone in the backfield, take on 2 blockers and shed them and make a play? Like, I really just wanted to see that. We did see that in the Arkansas State game. He makes his first career tackle for loss. He also recorded his first career pressure on PFF, which is nice. Listen, I know that sounds like I'm being facetious. He's a young guy. He's in his 3rd year of the program, but in your 3rd year in the SEC, that's about when you should start really playing on the defensive line. And so he's playing some snaps. He's getting some experience. He's starting to have some success. This is something you can at least build on. I'm not saying I'm sold on Ian Jaffard, but it's at least something you can build on there with the starting group. By the way, for those curious, Ian Jaffard has played 53 snaps. He has logged a 75.9 overall grade, 72.4 run grade, and a 70.9 pass rush grade, which I don't know how they came there with only the 1 pressure, but I'm not going to argue too much. But encouraging start to the season so far, albeit, again, against lesser competition. But nice to see Ian Jaffard kind of join the party a little bit. We'll see if he can build on that. Obviously, a big test for this defensive line coming up against Ole Miss. Make no mistake about that. But at least that first group you feel okay about. Now, here's what I don't love. I'm going to get into some snap counts now. And as you guys know, and maybe you don't know this, defensive lines in the SEC, if you go back to 2022, and Arkansas didn't even have that great of a defense, they had legitimately 8 or 9 guys that rotated. They used to do full-on D-line subs, 4 for 4 in the middle of a drive. They would send 4 new guys in there. Arkansas doesn't do stuff like that this year. They didn't do stuff like that last year. The list of guys that they truly trust to play is a lot smaller than it has been in past years. So, if you don't believe me, so I mentioned Cam Ball leads the group overall, playing defensive tackle, has played 96 snaps. I saw people being dead serious, and they were critical of Cam Ball. They were like, I didn't like how winded Cam Ball was when he came off the field. I didn't like, is he not in good shape? Like, why is Cam Ball gasping for air when he comes off the field? You want to know why he's gasping for air? Because he's playing 50 GD snaps in games. That is not what you do with a defensive tackle. There, dude, even in the NFL level, Jalen Carter, whoever you think the best interior defensive lineman on the planet is not playing 50 snaps per game for their team unless you're maybe at like the high school level. Maybe at the high school level, you just leave your nose tackle that's a 4-star. You leave him in there. At the SEC level, defensive tackles do not play 50 snaps per game. That is not a thing you do. You will not, literally, whoever the number 1 interior lineman drafted in the NFL this year, he is not going to play anywhere near 50 snaps per game for his team. That is really hard to do. It's not the same as being a receiver, being a corner, or being a quarterback, obviously. Like, you're literally, that's physical. That is a grind. And this is a guy who's been banged up, by the way, all offseason. He missed all of spring practice with an elbow surgery, missed the 2 scrimmages that Arkansas had leading up to the season. They wanted to be cautious with him. I believe it was like a shoulder or a pec or something like that. Hasn't been super healthy all offseason, and now you're playing him 48 snaps in each of the first 2 games. That is not sustainable. That is not something Arkansas can continue to expect to do. I would also point out, Arkansas has not played a 4-quarter game yet. They've played their backups in the 4th quarter of each of the last 2 games and for a little bit of the 3rd quarter, week 1. So the fact that you've already starting to push the limits of like what you should do with your your star defensive tackle in a game that you haven't even played 4 quarters yet, like, is he going to play 60 snaps against Ole Miss? That is a massive, massive red flag. I'll move on here to move on the point, but I just wanted to hammer that home because that is unreal. And I saw people like being critical of Cam Ball, who, by the way, is not like, not lit the world on fire, hasn't had a ton of production. That's a separate conversation. But people that were critical of him for being winded, it's like, dude, that's a lot of action there, man. Quincy Rhodes, by the way, has played 76 snaps through 2 games, so just under 40 per game for him. Phillip Lee is 75. Both of those guys, your 2 starting ends, you feel good about. Just under 40 snaps per game. Also, wouldn't recommend, but at least like with like a defensive end, I can kind of see 30 snaps a game, 30, 35. Arkansas played Landon Jackson like 50-something snaps per game last year. I thought that was crazy. I could see 30, 35 for a defensive end. That's about right. So I'm not going to, that's not terribly egregious. Danny Saili and Ian Jaffard have played 53 snaps apiece, both with 53. So right at, 26, 27 snaps per game through the first 2 weeks. Also, really, I got to be honest, don't love that, but it's like that's, okay, we can live with that. Moving on a little bit, you got Justice Boone and Charlie Collins. Justice Boone's played 42 snaps. Charlie Collins has played 36. So right around 20 snaps per game for those 2 guys. I have now gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 defensive linemen. Now we're getting to the point of guys that are playing about 20 snaps per game. And remember, there's been some garbage time in these weeks. And then after that, it's, a freshman, Kevin Otis, a redshirt freshman, Kavion Anderson. They have played 20 and 21 snaps total. And then Ken Talley, the Michigan State transfer, who's been running with the threes a lot, he has played 20 snaps. So about 10 per game for those guys. And again, mostly in garbage time. So with the first team defense, it's basically a 7-man rotation there on the defensive line. That is an issue. And that is an issue. And it's one that maybe you get away with early on, or maybe you kind of, you find someone else that you can throw into that mix. Maybe one of these freshmen come back. Maybe David Oki comes back and he accounts for a good bit of that. I would hope he can eat into some of Cam Ball's workload at the very least. But you're like 1 or 2 injuries away from really being in a bad spot. Like, what happens if one of those guys is banged up for 2 quarters? Like, how are you going to get through those 2 quarters? And I just worry. We saw multiple games last year, Missouri and Texas A&M really come to mind, where Arkansas kind of ran out of steam late. They kind of ran out of gas in the 4th quarter, put in that second group of D-line, and they weren't able to hold up. I worry we might be headed towards something similar there. But overall, to tie it all up, I've been borderline pleased with the play of the defensive line through 2 weeks, but I am not encouraged moving forward that this is like a sustainable thing that is going to carry Arkansas throughout SEC play. Mark me in the camp of a little bit concerned. At linebacker, again, I gave my rant last with the offense. I ranted about quarterbacks, and then I was like, it's really not going to take me too long on the receivers and running backs. There's not much to really dissect here. Linebacker, not a lot to dissect. Xavier Sorey and Steven Dix are your 2 guys. They played 93, 94 snaps respectively. Xavier Sorey was much better in week 2 and week 1. Sam Pittman attributed that to him having time to practice leading up to game 2 instead of game 1. I buy that, especially since I've seen Xavier Sorey be very good at football before. And he was very good at football on Saturday against Arkansas State. He looked awesome, looked a lot more dangerous than he did in week 1. So I buy all that. Steven Dix is there might not be a more consistent player on the team than Steven Dix for over the last 2 years of just does his job, 8 to 10 tackles every game. He's not going to be doing anything crazy. He's not going to get sacks off the edge. He's kind of man in that middle spot. He's the Mike. Just very solid. You know what you're getting. I love that in a linebacker. I love when you don't even have to think about your linebackers. And Arkansas's got 2 older guys. Both are going to have a chance to play at the next level. Both have played a lot of football in the SEC, have played a lot of football at the Division I level, have seen offenses, seen every different type of offense, are good communicators as well. Very important for the defense. Any issues this Razorback team has on defense, which there are some and there will be things pop up, I do love the ability these linebackers have to sort of diagnose and dissect some of this and maybe help out in some areas. We've seen Xavier Sorey, by the way. I mentioned the pass rush, how you've had 9 pressures from Phillip Lee. You've had 6 pressures from Quincy Rhodes. Xavier Sorey has offered 5 QB pressures as well. Bradley Shaw has offered a couple. They're the only other guys. All those defensive linemen I just listed, all of them have like 1 or 2 pressures. Xavier Sorey is doing more pass rush than all but 2 of Arkansas's defensive linemen. Now, of course, he's playing more snaps, so it kind of makes sense, but he's going to help out there. Bradley Shaw's another guy I want to mention. He has played 50 snaps through 2 games, which honestly is lower than I thought. I just feel like every time I look up, I see him out there. He's had some pass rush snaps. He's dropped into coverage a little bit. He's helped in the run game. PFF hasn't graded him super well, but it's been cool to see Bradley Shaw get some experience. Seems to be taking the right steps and is going to be a guy this time next year who will be taking over that mantle as one of those linebackers you can count on. And he's now taking a step as a starter. They don't list him as a starter, but he's been playing a good amount of snaps. Love to see him getting experience. Outside of that, man, the next highest on the team in terms of snaps from the linebacker position is Wyatt Simmons, the in-state product, who has played 18 snaps total for Arkansas. So roughly 9 per game. Not roughly 9 per game, 9 per game. And by the way, I mentioned Quincy Rhodes was the highest graded defender among qualified Razorbacks. I had to say that because Wyatt Simmons is actually the highest graded Razorback on PFF at like an 85 point something. Been crushing in his reps. Love to see that. I mean, he's a young kid that had a great high school career. Seems like he can help as well. That's awesome. I'm surprised that they haven't played more of those linebackers. Like we haven't seen a ton of Andrew Harris. He's played about 12 snaps. We haven't seen much of Trent Whalen. We've seen Tavion Wallace, the really talented freshman, who I'm very encouraged. Like, I don't expect a true freshman linebacker to come in and just start really playing a high number of snaps right away. Even Bradley Shaw only played sparingly, handful of snaps here and there. But I'm excited about the potential of Tavion Wallace. I really like that room. But for now, it's really just a 3-man race there. And it's really like the top 2, of course, are going to play almost every snap. And then Bradley Shaw mixed in there for about 25 per game. I think that's something Arkansas can make a living doing. Moving on a bit to corner. Kenai Walker, man. Kenai Walker has been awesome. Like, I don't know how else to say it. He's been really good through 2 weeks, and I was very concerned about the cornerback position coming into the year. There were a lot of people in the offseason who really wanted Selman Bridges, the redshirt freshman who was on campus last year, entered the portal for a little bit, comes out of the portal, played in the bowl game. They wanted to see him kind of assert himself as one of those top corners, and they also would have liked maybe Keyshawn Davila, the number 1 JUCO cornerback, who's a little small for my liking at corner, but it's whatever. They were kind of hoping, hey, maybe these guys can win that job. Jaheim Singletary is a guy that we've been seeing play at Arkansas for a while. Had a lot of downs. We'll just say that, and ups and downs is what I mean. I don't mean anything bad there. But I think people wanted to see some new faces at the position. And when I say that people wanted to see new faces, I don't think Kenai Walker was who they necessarily had in mind. Not to say that people thought he was going to be bad, but you just look on paper, he's a guy that had some experience, played 2 years at Oklahoma, started the majority of 2 years ago in 2023, lost his job about halfway through 2024. His grades were down across the board, and now he enters the portal and winds up at Arkansas. Me personally, I looked at that and I was like, okay, so is that really a guy who's going to come in and be a solution to a problem at corner for you at Arkansas? Probably not. And I'm not saying, it's time to declare him as the solution and the answer, but through 2 weeks, man, he has been unbelievable. Has an overall grade of 78.0. He is the second highest graded player on the defense. That overall grade is number 37 nationally among 686 corners in the entire FBS division. That is 6th among 40 SEC corners. Now, again, level of competition, I get all that, but they had a pretty solid matchup against Corey Rucker, him and Julian Neal, and they held up, man. Last week, Kenai Walker and Julian Neal were targeted, I believe, 14 times, surrendered like a total of 50 yards. Again, level of competition, I get it, but in terms of just grading what we've seen so far from the corners, week 2 was a very good step in the right direction. Now, you're facing a much tougher test in week 3, but Kenai Walker so far, and by the way, Kenai Walker, you may say, well, yeah, but they sucked against Alabama A&M. Kenai Walker was not targeted once in that Alabama A&M game. So he was just kind of minding his business while other things were going on around him. That ain't got nothing to do with him. And then he was great when he was tested against Arkansas State. So seems like and by the way, he fits that kind of big, long, physical body type that they want out there at the defensive backs. Kenai Walker, man, I've been very impressed. Seems like a motivated guy. Seems like he maybe took it personally that things didn't go well for him at Oklahoma last year. He seems to have gotten better, man, responded well. And so it would be nice if Arkansas could get some of that stability. It would make me feel better about the group overall. Julian Neal, by the way, the Fresno State transfer, has emerged as that other starting corner, and he was the guy that sort of got picked on a little bit in week 1 against Alabama A&M. gave up some plays in man coverage, and you kind of wondered, all right, we heard all this stuff about man coverage all offseason. Are they really going to do that? They did do that a lot against Arkansas State, press man coverage, like challenging them at the line of scrimmage, which I think you kind of have to do. If you're going to blitz and you're going to throw all these stunts and pressures, you kind of need to be up there playing at the line of scrimmage a little bit and at least have that ability to throw at teams. You can't just play soft coverage all game against these really good play callers and not expect them to find ways to exploit that. So I think it's important for Arkansas to continue to be able to play some man-to-man on the outside. Will they be able to do that against Ole Miss? Remains to be seen. This is a big opportunity, but the Arkansas corners could really shut us up real quick. I'm not predicting for you that they will, but I will just give them credit through 2 weeks. Been very good. We'll see if they can keep it up. One thing I have noticed, by the way, because while I'm talking corners, I'm going to kind of transition to the safeties by talking about the nickel position. So Jordan Young, the Cincinnati transfer, was one of Arkansas's, I thought, one of their better additions in the offseason. When he committed, I was like, oh, wow, this is a guy that, multi-year starter at Cincinnati, graded out pretty well. Like, this seems like a guy that could really help. He was banged up the entire spring. He did not practice at all in the spring, so they didn't get a good look at him, and then he kind of joins the fray in the fall, ends up earning the job as the starter at nickel. But I thought it was weird that we didn't really hear much about him. And I'm like, why is it that they're not, like, talking this guy up? Like, is he not one of their best guys? Is he not going to start at that hog position and be a huge piece of the team? So far, through 2 games, Jordan Young has played 50 snaps. And you may wonder, okay, well, he's playing 50 snaps. Who is it that's been playing nickel? Because that's only 25 snaps per game. Arkansas has been kind of piecing that together. So Caleb Wooden is the short answer. He's played 82 snaps, but it has not really been at nickel. He has played a little bit. I believe I think it's like 11 snaps he has lined up in that hog position. Sometimes Larry Worth has lined up in that hog position. Sometimes Bradley Shaw has come in as a third linebacker, not at the hog position, but sort of, substitution like that. They've kind of mixed and matched Miguel Mitchell, but for the most part, Arkansas has played with 3 safeties, and they've kind of positioned them around the field. Mostly what they've done is had Larry Worth kind of in the box playing closer to the line of scrimmage. And so you had Caleb Wooden and Miguel Mitchell kind of back there at deep safety spots there. It's been interesting that Jordan Young has not been a huge part of what Arkansas's got going on defensively. And will that always be the case? Will Arkansas face some teams that like to go 3-4 wide and have some guys in the slot that you really have to defend man-to-man coverage? Maybe it's just been a matchup thing, but I've been very interested by the snap distribution. But then at the same time, Arkansas went 3 safeties for the most part last year, whether it was Hudson Clark, Jaden Johnson, and Larry Worth, or Miguel Mitchell getting in there at the end. Arkansas mixed and matched pretty much a good bit. Another guy, and played a lot of 3 safety looks. Another guy, speaking of the 3 safeties, one of those guys that has not been playing a ton at safety is Quintavious Scandrett. Seems like Larry Worth, like they list Larry Worth above him on the depth chart, which obviously Larry Worth, we love him, no doubt about it, returning starter for the most part. Like, not a surprise, but Quintavious Scandrett's played a lot of football, graded out very well at his previous stop. Like, I thought he would play a lot more. It just hasn't been a huge part of the fold. And so I think that's actually weird that I feel good about Arkansas's depth in the secondary, because at the worst, I mean, corner, your depth looks like Selman Bridges, a young guy that you want to like, but he's maybe not quite ready to play. And then an older guy in Jaheim Singletary, who has not had a productive college career, but has a lot of experience, and you can kind of throw out there, break glass in case of emergency. And at safety, you've got 2 guys. I mean, Caleb Wooden is not necessarily listed as a starter for you, but that's a guy that started SEC games. Quintavious Scandrett, a guy that has played 3 years, started at Eastern Michigan, like played a lot of football at the D1 level. He can hardly even get on the field. And Jordan Young, a 2-year starter at Cincinnati, can barely get on the field. I think it's kind of a testament to what Arkansas feels about some of those top guys at the safety position. Now, if you look at PFF, which again, not the end all be all, they all kind of grade out about average. Like, there hasn't been a ton to evaluate of the safety position. We haven't seen Arkansas challenge downfield a whole lot. We haven't seen those safeties really have to come up and have a huge impact in the run game or anything. There hasn't been. They're that last line of defense. We haven't seen that last line of defense used yet a whole lot. So there's not a ton to really evaluate. I feel like Arkansas safeties are fine. Like, that was not a position group that I was super concerned about. Like, I think it's similar to a defensive line. The ends and tackles are a little bit different. I feel that way about corner and safety, where when we have questions about the secondary, it really is out there on the edge at corner, not as much in the backfield there at the safeties. But overall, man, I guess I've come to the end of this whole long rant, which ended up going over an hour, which I did not want to happen. But sometimes you just order a Yappuccino, I guess. But anyways, all in all, I say all that to say nothing. That's just kind of how I feel about Arkansas's position groups. I'd be interested to hear what you guys have to say about what I said that pissed you off, what you disagree with, or maybe how you feel like this matchup is going to go against Ole Miss. I think we're going to know a lot more, and so maybe a lot of what I said here in this podcast is going to be useless on Monday after they played Ole Miss, and we'll be able to look back and say, you were wrong about that, wrong about this. But I hope I did a decent enough job of kind of surveying the land and seeing how we feel about each spot. There's been some encouraging developments at pretty much every spot, but I also feel like we haven't gotten as many definitive answers as it maybe seems based on how well Arkansas's first two games have gone. Massive test against Ole Miss. Really looking forward to seeing how each of these different position groups perform. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, man. And maybe we'll do something like this again. Maybe I'll just wait till Curtis is back in action so I can actually have someone to rattle some ideas off of and bounce it back and forth. But wanted to get my takes out there. Wanted to give you guys some football content on this beautiful Tuesday. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope you'll stay subscribed. Hope you will continue to listen to all that we have going on. Inside Arkansas Live coming later today. The Bombastic, we're going to have more baseball scrimmages going on. We'll have our pregame show, of course, on Saturday. Thursday, we'll do our EA Sports live stream, postgame show, all of the above. Looking forward to another great week of football coverage. Appreciate you guys for being here. Inside Arkansas, it's Andrew Ellis, and I am signing off. Woo damn pig.